Well, I mean, originally it actually was music in a small space or a chamber, and it was typically done either in the home or for royalty. And the composers, the great composers like Mozart and Beethoven, they wrote pieces that were intended to be done and performed in smaller spaces. So that's why chamber music came to be. Joseph Haydn was the father of the string quartet, and he actually wrote 87 string quartets, believe it or not. And he, typically these composers would be played in the homes of wealthy patrons, or for, like I say, royalty, or people would just get together and have a party. Mozart and Haydn actually played in a string quartet together at one point. Beethoven also was an avid amateur violist in addition to being a very great pianist. So it was one of these things that you get a small group together. It can be a trio, it can be a duo, it can be a quintet, it can be a chamber orchestra, really any combination of the above. So it gives composers a lot of freedom and a lot of leeway to create something special. And it often ended up being some of the greatest output of a composer. Beethoven wrote his last quartets, which many people think are some of the greatest music that was ever written, at the end of his life, after he'd written the Ninth Symphony. So,
what got you involved with chamber music?
That's an interesting question. When I was born, my mother took her first look at me and said, "Oh, there's my cellist." She saw my hands. I had very big hands for a baby. So it was sort of predetermined, but I actually was drawn to the cello, and really since very, very early on. And I ended up taking up the cello when I was 8, which is actually late for somebody who's going to be a professional instrumentalist. And I grew up in a small town in Montana, but had good teachers and was able to end up going to one of the great institutions, the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, and I met a lot of my future colleagues in the professional world there. And one thing led to another. I ended up having a career as a performer. So.
For Fredericksburg to have a chamber music festival for this, what's coming up now over the next few days, this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's fun. Heidi Lewalder was the founder. She was one of the world's great harp players and a wonderful musical entrepreneur, and she was living in Fredericksburg at that time, and she said, this town doesn't have a chamber music festival. And of course, she'd played at many of the chamber festivals all over the world. So she, started one here, and we actually came. This is my 35th year here. As a member of the Muir Quartet, and then I came as a soloist as well for many years later on as well. So Heidi really is responsible for the creation of this festival, and then of course you can't just have a creator; you also have to have supporters. And Fredericksburg has really been a truly remarkable town in terms of support for this. I mean, chamber music festivals don't usually live this long, so it's been wonderful to have. Not only wonderfully generous supporters, but also we developed many great friendships here.
Those that come and hear this year's Chamber Festival, what can they expect?
Well, we have an interesting variety of programming. There's a bit of the Czech tradition. The Smetana and Dvorak will be kind of some of the featured pieces. And then the Brahms Piano Quintet. And Brahms is a great supporter of Dvorak when he was starting his career. So there's these intermixes of composers. Some Mozart, the great flautist Carol Winstens, who has been here many, many times. She's one of the greatest flautists in the world, and she chooses to come to Fredericksburg every year to join. So it's delightful to have her here. We'll also have works like Glinka, from the Russian tradition. Alexander Fitterstein has been here many times. My sister, Kathy Reynolds, who's arguably one of the greatest bassoon players on the planet, will be here with her wonderful horn-playing husband. So it's a nice combination. And then we have a couple of new artists coming. Takumi Takuchi is a fantastic violinist who recently entered the Boston Symphony. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So it's delightful to have him here. And then Andy Mark is going to be here to replace my wife, who's had a sudden medical emergency in the family. But it's a nice mix.
Is it tough to get everyone to mesh and pull something like this off?
That's a very good question. I tend to try to pick people who come from the same kind of musical background and tradition. So there's a certain kind of style of playing that is, either from that institution like the Curtis Institute or Juilliard. And then actually Mark Berger actually studied with the violist in our quartet, and Mark is the violist for this festival. So there's a lot of lineage that happens as well.